Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me today to speak at this event. I enjoy coming back and talking with students and with Jay. It's happened a couple times. It could be more. You can invite me back some more. It's an open invitation. So I thought when if I was included and I thinking of my background, what would be most useful to talk about is my experience in consulting. And I'll frame that shortly. In working in consulting, I don't think I could do anything without a PowerPoint slide. So I do feel, I will acknowledge that I'm the first to put that up, but it helps for myself to kind of keep on track with my messages. So I graduated in 2004 from the master's program with an MA. I did not do the work term, and so I did not finish with an MSc, which was a little bit of a disappointment. And Jay and I talked about that recently. I think it has a little bit more swag and prestige. But other than that, I think my education was, about the same as other people. I wanted to start with a picture of me. This is '93, because I did my undergraduate degree at Waterloo as well, at BC Matthews Hall, across the street, in applied health sciences and kinesiology. Many people ask, how did you go from, phys ed to consulting? And part of that is because the paths that I take, I usually go off the road. And so this is an image of the road not taken, the Robert Frost poem, which I think of, and I find that I take those paths. And so what I'll talk about a little bit is the relevance of the IO Psych degree when you go off the path. And I think it was great to come on after Pat and after Leanne to hear about your stories, because I can relate a lot to that. And I think many of us do go off a little bit of the path. And so I'll talk about what I think really came out as the important strengths and skills or currencies that you can think of as you're going through your career. So let me frame my experience. I think the relevance, or my experience for today, is consulting in an area that's not IO psychology. So when I graduated, I started at Deloitte. I went into consulting, and as Pat, very conveniently mentioned to me earlier, she did not see me as a consultant at all. And she's 100% correct. And I think many people, as I was in consulting, initially, didn't necessarily see me as a consultant either. But I ended up at Deloitte, and it's because I was applying to different areas and I was networking, and there wasn't an opening in an IO Psych position available to me. My cousin worked at Deloitte, and she was able to put my resume in front of the hiring manager, and the rest is history. I think the hiring manager fell asleep in the interview. There was no strong case study to complete. It was really 2 or 3 interviews, friendly conversations, and that started my career. So that was my fortunate opportunity that got my foot in the door. And then I was there for 8.5 years. And in big firm consulting, in any type of consulting, it can be very tiring. It can, there's a lot of time demands. I had a young family. My bookend for my graduate career was my son was born at the beginning and my daughter was born just after I finished. And when you have small children and you're starting the career, it is very difficult. So I feel accomplished to have successfully navigated 8 years there. Then I went to the Bank of Montreal. I found that I'm not a very good banker. And then I came back into consulting, and now I'm at Accenture. So the context that I'll give and the lessons that I learned is what I think is not an IO Psych path, which is just the one that I took. And so many will be looking for careers in consulting that are more applicable. But these lessons, I think, do relate. So, one bit is, if anyone's watched kid movies and seen Ratatouille, it's about a rat who can cook. And so anyone can cook, right? When you get into consulting, anyone can be a psychologist. And when I do a lot of change management, well, anyone can do change management. And so how do you define yourself and your skills when people feel themselves the expert? So I had a lot of difficulty bringing knowledge. I didn't actually even understand what extra knowledge that I had. And I mean, I'll tie it to Leanne's, what you were saying, and when Pat, your question was, do you really know what your strength is coming out? And a lot of times you don't. And so my perspective back is recognizing what those are. And when I reflected back, I think the subject matter of IO psychology is a fantastic starting point from perspective of core competency. So I couldn't help but not having a Venn type diagram in the slides. And so I just took this from the from the internet, and I would say there's probably another group of core competencies that's related to what we study and everything. I mean, impression management was the thing that when I started Deloitte, I could see it all over the place that people were excelling at this ability to manage the impressions that they're providing. And other junior consultants who started had great difficulty in understanding the importance of that. And for me, I was like, I understand how this fits in. So while I didn't apply the knowledge, I think it was a great background to help me navigate and be successful and last and find my place. So that was one lesson that I learned. The second lesson, and this is the number one thing that I tell anybody, any student that Jay sends my way to talk to for an information interview, is what to say about yourself when you're going into an interview. What is it that you bring? It is your analytical thinking. It's your brain is trained to take on difficult questions, to do research, to focus on a topic, to build your whole thinking around something where maybe when you started you didn't know much about. And that's what any consultant does. And certainly when you're in a big firm and you're thrown into projects that have nothing to do with your background, you're asked to do. So this is the number one skill. And I started by trying to do a longer list. It's not a long list. In my mind, everybody comes from, I would say a master's degree and a graduate training is to have this, and that is exceptional. And different than perhaps an MBA or an MIR program at some universities. So this only emerged, I only realized this when I was talking to the OD class in 2010, and people were asking me, like, so what is it that you learned? Are you applying the knowledge from your degree? And I'm like, no, I'm not applying the knowledge from my degree. But I do have this that I see as different than other folks. So that's an important currency. A third lesson is when you're in the sea of MBA grads and there is very little diversity in way of thinking. So diversity in terms of population of employment, that's one thing. But in terms of way of thinking, it is very narrow still in a big consulting firm. And when you're the IO, like nobody really knows what IO psych is. So when you're this person who doesn't have an MBA, they don't even, actually most people assumed I did have an MBA degree. You just by nature have a different perspective. And it can be frustrating at times because it's hard to get that across. But when you're on difficult challenges and when the ask is to be innovative and creative, which it is more and more, it is a perspective that is unique to what you can bring to large firm consulting, where there are all other types of people around you, other in terms of degree background. So this is something that's emerged as I've done different projects to see that my perspective is different, is valid, and very valuable in the right occasions to bring creativity and innovation. So, with the Ratatouille theme, the other message of the movie is anyone can cook, but only the fearless can be great. And there's a few things I learned that actually the theme of this day really resonates to, and I will say, I didn't know what other people were going to talk about, and I didn't know what necessarily the theme of the day was when we were putting together the thoughts, but this it couldn't be better almost. And my message is, anyone can cook, but it's with help that you can become great, and it's with the connections. My experience was, I didn't feel necessarily I had that in the first years coming out of the career, and that I didn't know how to relate what my, it's not just relating who to talk to and what jobs are out there, but it's like, how do I talk about myself to sell myself? It wasn't clear to me what my skills or selling points were. And the other part of that is, it is a machine to get a job. There's processes. Companies go to schools to recruit from specific schools and specific programs, and the only reason they do that because they don't know who else to talk to. And if you're not in the machine process, it is very hard to know when the interviews are, to prepare effectively, to have a contact of somebody on the inside to give you some advice. And I try to do that where I can. It's part of the nature of what big firms think they should hire MBAs. They don't yet think that they're missing out. And when they do, I think that'll help a lot if people are interested in management consulting to get positions there. So I think it's the network and it's connecting and it's with help that is the part that maybe was missing from my experience, and that the more that we do this, the better it is. And then my recap. Thank you very much.
Do we have some questions?
So thank you for that presentation and the insights about the analytical skills. Mm-hmm. So this is something naturally we want to help people develop. Is there any way you can put your finger on anything we did right that helped with that?
I think for me it developed, and I came into the program from living abroad for 3 years from an undergrad in kinesiology. So I came in and I took some psychology undergrad courses as a catch-up. And I remember the first classes, and Pat, I think, sitting with you, and it's like, here's a topic we're going to talk about, do some research, come back the next week. In the first weeks, it was terrible. But that process of a topic that you're looking at, go find out information about it, come back, having a critical assessment of your thinking around it is the process where it came together. And then, reviewing articles, being critical about what you're reviewing, and having that feedback. That's how it evolved.
I'm going to juice it up a little. I'm going to disagree because that's what my whole
Good.
field of expertise is, that we don't have enough conflict. So I'm going to throw some in. I think the MBAs are full of analytical skills. Mm-hmm. They tear everything apart, and new graduate students are great at tearing things apart. They know how to look at an article and tell me all that's wrong with the method and all those sorts of things. And they're no good to me until they can put something together, till they can synthesize. So I actually think if you take Bloom's taxonomy and you say analytical skills is here, I'm actually looking for one notch above. I'm looking for the ability to synthesize. So it's not just go. So I have the same answer as you, which I think with the best experiences in graduate school were the ones that were incredibly ambiguous. Those were great. I'm sure Jay's first class of every OD course for 25 years that he's fought that battle for, of just, I don't know, what do you want the curriculum to be? And I would love to just have a montage of the students' reactions to that first class every year for 25 years, and the gossip and the talk that goes on right after that class. And to me, those are the experiences you want. Find ambiguous experiences with no answer key and do those. Because that's what the real world's like. I didn't even know what the term rubric meant. There's no marking scheme right?
Yeah.
So just to be controversial. I would
No, I
say
agree.
analytical skills, the MBAs are full of analytical skills. I think you guys come out with some ability to synthesize and to connect dots and to build something, not just to tear something down.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for the sake of a response to the response. I think this ties to the different perspective and thinking is that I find certainly the analytical skills, but in a framework that is consistent and that is it's operational almost. And so this is a challenge. And I talked to some there's a handful of other IO psych people that I know in consulting, and I said, what do you think for feedback? And they said, well, one of the things I find is they start and you get to work and they're like open to so many different ideas, and it's hard to focus on the solution and just get it done. So there's like really quick critiquing, just get it done afterwards. And we're thinking of different ideas and seeing the different options and so forth. So I agree that certainly it's not a unique skill that nobody else has, but I think we don't follow so much of the framework. It's the ambiguity that you spoke to that is combined to that. And you're right, and it's also bringing it back together. So making a thought, connection of thoughts and a response, following breaking it apart. I agree with that.